Hello there everyone, I'm Christina of CSLdesigns and today I'm going to show you how to make these adjustable love wirework rings. And I made these two here, so one in silver and then one in copper, just to show you how they can look different in different colour wires. And then what we have as the main feature obviously is the word love, and then we just added some embellishments below it there with some flourishes, which is also how we finish off our wires. And going around to the side of the ring band, and on the back here we have the adjustable pad. So they're also nice and comfortable to wear because they're adjustable and they're not too bulky. So they sit a little something like that. So you could kind of have the word love emphasized with those little extra design flourishes that we've added in. And then what I also thought while making this, because I've just chosen to use the same colour with both wires here on both of mine, that's just what I chose in this case, but while making it I thought of something else. Because we're using two different wires, so a base wire and a weaving wire, and basically the only part on this ring that's not weaved is the word love. So what I thought was actually using two different colours of wire. You could use one colour for the base wire, so for instance that could be copper, and you could use another colour for the weaving wire, which could be silver. And then what you would end up with is the effect of everything that's weaved being more silver coloured and the word love being copper. So that would really make that word stand out more, but obviously that's just a thought I had while making them. It's completely up to you how you want to make yours, but if you want to learn how to make them here, then keep watching. So these are the materials that we're going to need. Now all we really need for this are two different gauges of wire. First of all here I have a 1mm gauge. This is going to be the base wire, so the thickest and the strength of the ring. And then here I have a 0.4mm. This is going to be the weaving wire around the base wire. So then let's get our wire ready and let's get started. So then the length of wire that we'll need is first of all a length of a 1mm base wire here, and this is 30 centimeters long. And then we need two separate lengths of a 0.4mm weaving wire of about 60 centimeters each. So we then first of all need to grab our base wire here that we've already cut ready, and we just want to make sure that it's nice and straight here, so we smooth it out so it doesn't have any obvious kinks or bends in it, because then what we need to do is write the word love first of all across the middle of this piece. So I'm going to be using a couple of different pliers to create the word, and I'm going to start out using my chain nose pliers here. So I then grab my length of wire as well, and I want to make sure that I start about 10 centimeters in from one end. So just place the wire in your pliers around that point, because then, like I said, we're going to write the word across the middle of the length of wire here, and then we're going to have a length on either end of the word that we can then make the rest of the ring with, so obviously the ring band and that. So we need to start with L. So what I'm going to do is place my pliers here, and then I want to put a bit of a bend into it, also so we know where kind of the starting point is. So a bit like that. Then you want to start adding a curve as well. So I'm working with the long end here. So bring it further around and put a curve into it. And then we need to come back down again. So I need to place my pliers where I want the top of the L to be. So kind of just judge that. Obviously how large you want your letters to be. Obviously it's a ring, so you don't want them to be too large, but just so they sit nicely and comfortably on your finger. And then you want to bring this long end that we're working with and basically writing with back down around the pliers, and then overlap the first little tail. Just keep bringing it around, and it doesn't have to be perfect yet or anything. We can keep adjusting it. It's just to kind of get it started and get the main shape in place. And then this you can also just straighten back out, because we do want them to end up being straight from the word on either end. And otherwise it's a matter of manipulating the wire here until you're happy with it. So what I like to do a little bit is tighten this up just a little bit by putting it in between my pliers there. And I like to hold my fingers by it, because otherwise it can kind of slip and it doesn't tighten up. But that's actually what I want it to do, is tighten like this. And it really depends on how you want yours to look. And then we'll make sure we have those curves in place. They're pretty even looking. And then we need to bring this long length that we're working with back out again. So it's going to continue more or less that straight line from the other side here. So we can place our pliers there and then put a bend into it, kind of opposite of where the other bend is. So something a bit like that. That's basically our L. And then anything, like I said, you need to sharpen up or change or adjust, you can always do that while we're here. It's easier to do it while you're at that letter. So basically focus on that and then until you're happy with it, and then you can move on to the next one. So the next one that we need to do obviously is the O. And for that I'm going to be using my 6-step bail making pliers here. You can also use round nose pliers, just make sure you then go a little bit further down where the graduation is. So obviously the O becomes large enough, you don't want to be right at the tip. But then what I'm going to be doing is using the second smallest on this one here. I feel that fits quite nicely in the size. So I'm going to use that to make the O and get a nice and even one. So you simply just place your wire into your pliers where you want the O to be. So obviously continuing the word, so right after the L that we've already made. So I want it to be somewhere like this. So you want to make sure you do leave a bit of space between, because obviously there's also got to be space for the wire, but also so you can see it's obvious that the separate letters creating a word. Then once you're happy with it, then I'm going to bring the long tail all the way around to create a full circle, and you can just kind of rotate it in your pliers and then come back out for now. I'm just going to bring it back down here so you can see we now have a full circle, and you can just double check if you're happy with the positioning of it, because if you're not, you can always change this a bit. If it's gone a little bit too far away from the L, there's a bit too much space, you can always grab onto your O there basically with your pliers and roll it inwards, or if it's a bit too close you can roll it outwards. So it really depends how yours has ended up. Then what we need to do is actually continue this tail further up the side. So now what we actually have is the wire starting to more or less overlap there and laying side by side really. So we have already the full circle, so now I want a little accent, you could call it, in the O to give it a little bit of a nice touch and also to get it ready for the next letter. So I'm going to bring it back up towards the top, so not another full circle on top, but just up towards the top there. And then we need to swap pliers again to then use my round nose pliers for that, because we need to use that really fine point now that the round nose pliers have. And I'm then going to put that point, one of them, into my O, but up towards where the kind of final place is that they lie flat next to each other or overlap. So towards the top of your O there. So where you want that little accent to be basically. So I'm putting my pliers through it and then grabbing onto it nicely, and it's now grabbing onto both of the layers of the wire basically. Then I want to bring the tail back around that, and because it's the fine round nose pliers, the tip of them, I'm going to really make it tight to them. So much smaller kind of circle shape there, a little loop shape. Then obviously the larger one, which then creates that little accent. So you can see there on top of the O. And then we also have our wire going back out towards the right side here. We're going to continue writing and ready for the next letter as well. So I'm then grabbing my chain nose pliers again, because we need to make some bends in here to get the more angled shape of the V. So I want to go up a little bit above where that wire overlaps itself from that little accent that we made. And then we need to make the one side of the V first of all. So place my pliers, and then I want to bend my wire back. So also make sure you hold on to what you've already made so that doesn't go out of shape. But then bend it back kind of downwards. Like that. So you can see we're kind of starting to get the shape in place. Now if anything goes out of shape while you're making it, don't worry too much about it, because it can happen very easily. Just kind of put it back into shape while you're making it. So mine here, it kind of opened up that little accent a little bit too much, so you just basically tighten it back up again. And then you can sharpen up the bend that we're just currently working on. You can also go in from the other side and sharpen it up as well. Just make sure we get a nice bend in there, and we have the first half of the V coming downwards but a bit at an angle, just like that. So obviously that's how the V is. Then when you're happy with that, we obviously need to make the other half, but we need to make the bottom point. So you just come down to the point where, once you've made the point here, the bend in the wire, it's going to be level with the rest of the letters that we've already made. So you just kind of judge that by eye. So place your pliers about that point there, and then push the wire around your pliers to create that V shape, to obviously create the V. And again, we can sharpen it up by going on both sides and basically make it the shape that you want as well. So something a bit like that. And then just finish off the V and get the wire in the right position for the next letter. Go up to about the level of the first bend that we made down the other side, and then push it back out. And then back around a little bit and a little bit downwards to get it in place to start the E, which is obviously the last one. So there we then have the V as well. And for the final E, I'm going to swap to my round nose pliers again, because obviously one part of that, the E there, is going to be quite a small little circle shape. So that's the part we're creating first of all. So we need to go down the wire a little bit where we want that upper part of the E to be. And we're basically using the pliers here as a bit of a guide. So like that, and then push the tail that we're working with or writing with around them. And then just kind of look at it to get a feel for how it's going to look. And if you need to adjust anything, I feel like I need to kind of just bring it up a little bit, tighten it. You can just roll the pliers on the wires there, on the length of wire, if you want to tighten it up. So maybe a bit like that, to get the proportions of the E right. And then bring the tail overlapping the previous. Bring it around like this. You can see that's kind of the top part of the E there. And then I more or less like to do this bottom part a bit freehand. So I'll keep the pliers in there. And then I just make sure I put a curve into the wire as I'm bringing it around to come back out, straight out to the side from the end of the word. You can just have a look at it. If you need to tighten anything up, you can then also, if you feel like you want to tighten up the actual top part here a little bit, use a pair of flat nose or chain nose pliers, just like I did with the L in the beginning, and kind of just squeeze it together. A bit like you would tighten up prongs as well. So something like that. And then just make sure as well that all the letters here are pretty level on the top and the bottom. Obviously the L is taller, but the rest of them, so they basically would be how you would write them. More or less come across in a straight line. And then we have the tail coming straight out to the side from the bottom part of the E there. So just make sure of that as well. And if you need to straighten this back out, you can do that, because obviously it might have been a little bit misshapen through the heat of your hands while working with it. So there basically we have the word love written. So now we need to move on for the rest of the ring. So once we then have the word here, what we need to do is use these tails on either end to basically start forming the rest of the ring, so the ring band. So what I'm going to do is bring in my ring mandrel here, because first of all, obviously got to get the right shape in place, but also about the size. Now, even though it's an adjustable ring, I do prefer to still get it around the size that I want it to be, just so it's then slightly adjustable for whatever needed. So I'm going to place my love on my ring mandrel at approximately the size that I want. And then you first of all want to just shape the word here. So obviously that also lays nicely on your finger, so it's not a straight piece. It's going to kind of stick out. So shape that first of all, kind of just press it down without losing any of the writing obviously, and the shape we've done. And then I'm going to bring my two tails around towards the back. You can also just flip it around here. And then we basically need to overlap them on the back here. So they're then lying flat next to each other. Just a little bit like that, at kind of that midpoint of the back. And then it looks like that at the front. Now what you will find as well, that the wires will spring a bit open, so you can always bring it down to a smaller size and then shape it. So tighten it around a smaller size, and then as it springs open, it will kind of spring open more like to the size that you want. So that is a way to kind of deal with that. But obviously we can still reshape things later on as we keep making this, but it's just to have a good idea so far. So make sure to shape this, and now what we need to do is bend the tails again, because we need to get that point here so the ring becomes adjustable, but also so we bring it back out and we can then start weaving as well. So we then need to put some bends into these wires here. Now what we just need to make sure to do is that we do it in the middle of it. So to do that, I kind of like to look at it from different angles. So if you're looking at it from above here, so we can see this word on the opposite side, we need to get it about middle of that. But obviously on the back, that's where the opening is going to be, so the adjustable part. So we need to make sure we put the bends in the wires here in the right places. So I'm going to take my chain nose pliers, and then I'm going to judge it from what I feel is about the middle of the word. You can also just kind of flip it completely and just have a look at it to make sure you're about the middle of the word. And then we obviously just do one wire at a time here. Just going to do the one that's on the bottom first of all. It's the simplest. And then try and get it so it's not quite halfway, but just a little bit. This is the wire that's coming from the right and then going around the back. And it's the bottom one, like I said. So find about the middle on the back side here, but then just go a little bit to the side where that wire is coming from. And then place my pliers there. Double check everything. Move them a little bit. Grab onto the wire where you feel like you need to make the bend. I think something a bit like that. And then I'm just removing the ring mandrel here, so we can then actually bend the wire. And here you can also have a look, because obviously you might be able to see a little bit better with there's no ring mandrel in the middle there. So then what we need to do is, you can see that that's the bottom one. I need to then take that length, make sure you're holding onto that wire tightly with the pliers, and then bend it downwards, but around the pliers there. If you need to rotate anything, you can do that. So basically it comes back out to the side where it's coming from, and we end up having it lie next to itself like that. And then what we also want to do is just tighten this up a little bit, so we don't have too big of a gap between the same or the two kind of ends of the wire there. But we also don't want it to be completely tight, because there needs to be enough space to get the weaving wire in. So just tighten it up a little bit so we can still get the weaving wire in there. And then just make sure you bring out this wire here straight back out, and if you need to straighten it out, you can do that as well. So we now have them lying next to each other. So now we just need to repeat the same with the other side as well. And then you want to place your pliers on the other end of the wire there, so the one we haven't bent yet, but obviously then doing the same thing. So grab onto that with your pliers, and then also push this downward, so in the same direction, so we end up with the bends and the open ends going in the same direction there. So just push it down all the way around. Again, making sure you measure so you kind of put the bend in the right place. And then just bring it all the way around there. And don't worry about the shape of the ring band just yet. You can see here mine isn't perfect or anything. We can always reshape it. Main thing is just to get our wires in place, and so we can also then start weaving, because we can always go back to the ring mandrel as well, put it back on there to reshape it. Make sure to tighten this one up as well, just like the other side. So there's just space for the weaving wire, and as you just saw there, that can happen, so it kind of just twists in the pliers, but then you just kind of twist it back again. And otherwise just tighten it up until you're happy with how it is, and then just straighten this end back out. So then both of the ends, and we have the ring band here also ready to fully get it in shape, and we can start weaving as well. And I'm then going to place it back on my ring mandrel here. Again, get it to about the size that I want it to be, and then I'm just going to make sure I push it against so it sits tight around the ring mandrel on that right size and shape, because then we just need to shape the rest of these tails. So it's literally just bringing them around. So make sure you hold on to the back there, bring them around the side of it and towards the front of the ring, and the same with the other side as well. It's just so they get more or less the same shape as the ones we've already shaped. So like that. And just have them coming all the way around the side there, so you can see you have two wires now following, which is going to be the ring band really, and the same on the other side. So they're going to basically be crossing over at the front there. and we're just going to deal with them later on. Just leave these tails for now, because then what we need to start doing now is actually weave the ring band as well, so that's going to be sorted. So to start weaving, we need to grab one of the lengths of wire that we already cut ready of the 0.4 mil here, so the weaving wire, and I'm going to start weaving the ring band one side at a time. So I'm just going to start on this side first of all, and we basically want to start from where the adjustable part is, but because obviously there's nothing here to grab onto, I'm going to start a little bit further in, and we're just going to kind of push it out as we have a little bit of work done. So first of all, I just want to leave a short little tail here to hold on to, and otherwise I'm putting it behind these two wires here, so basically through the ring band. And then you got to obviously remember these two wires are crossing over, so we have to kind of just find a way of working with the weaving wire the easiest way possible. So the weave that I'm doing here is a diagonal wire weave. It's just one of my personal favorites, so you can do that, or you can do another weave where you're using two base wires. It's completely up to you. Check out my playlist of wire weaves and you can maybe find a different one there that you might prefer. But to show you how to do this one, well, we need to first of all attach the wire, because right now obviously it's loose. So I'm going to wrap it around the bottom one of the two first of all. So what I'm going to do, that's this open one, just wrap it around that one. So go in between these two ends of the wires, which then wraps it around there. And then we need to go over the top of both of them and basically down through the ring band. So I'm just kind of pushing it through there and then pulling the rest of it through as well. And now we need to wrap around the top one of the two by itself. So I need to come up between the two open ends there to get in between these two on this side of the ring band. And then to wrap around that top one by itself, go back down through the ring band again. And then come down behind them all. Now what I also like to do, because this is also the first one, you can just take a pair of pliers and make sure you squeeze the wraps nice and tight here. So you get a nice and tight weave. So like that. So just to show you again, we go around the bottom one by itself. So just imagine the two kind of separate wires that we will be making a weave on. But obviously we do have this other work, so just kind of work around that in some way. So I'm going around the bottom one by itself by going between the two open ends. And then go over the top of both of them. And then go down through the ring band. You can also kind of bring the wire, weaving wire, because we have that open end there, the adjustable part, just through that. Make sure you push your wraps nice and tight together and then come up between those two open ends and then push it down every time as well. And again, you can just kind of bring it through that open end, however you feel most comfortable. And then that's another full round of the weave now. Push it together there, get it nice and tight, and then you just keep going like this. And once you have a few rounds done, then I'm going to also then start pushing this down, because I'm going to have a little bit more to grab onto. So now I have a little bit done here. Like I mentioned, I then want to push it down. So just push the weave along the base wires there, basically until it won't go any further. So you push it all the way down to that bend there. And then still just leave that tail kind of out of the way. And then we now have this little thing, end, we can hold on to. And then otherwise we just continue weaving. And what we basically want to do is weave this until we get right before where that L starts. So now I reach that point there right before the L. Then I'm just going to leave this weaving wire here for now, because we're going to keep using it, but I'm just going to go to the other side first of all and then do that. So I'm just going to flip it over. And then basically we want to start weaving on this side in the exact same way. So I'm going to grab my other length of my weaving wire, and same principle, put a short length there behind, grab onto it, start further in and then push it down. Obviously here we just need to kind of maneuver a wire a little bit differently. So to wrap around the bottom one, I need to push my wire in between the two and kind of below that word there, and then pull it all the way through. So that's now attached and it's wrapped around the bottom one. Then go over the top of both of them, and then I'm just coming underneath this one, the top one of the two, and then going around the bottom one of those two open wires, because then that brings my weaving wire in between those two base wires there. And then I need to bring it down through, so you can either push it down through the ring band or bring it between the two ends there, so in that open space, and then just all the way down behind. And again, just make sure to push them close, starting out the weave here. And that's basically just how you wrap it on the other side. So it's the same basic weave, and again, keep wrapping this. Obviously make sure you push it down once you have a little length, and then wrap it until you reach the end of the E then, and then we have them wrapped on both sides. So now weed both sides all the way up until they meet the word there. So now what we have to do is deal with the tails of the base wire. So what I just like to do is place it back on my ring mandrel, just to make sure I keep the size and shape, and just kind of hold it there. Because what we then need to do is make the little embellishment underneath the word with these tails here, and we just want to make sure we get it as symmetrical as possible. So I just like to hold it tight there, and then we need to start shaping these. So I have one more towards the bottom there, they're kind of overlapping each other, so I'm just going to start with that one, and then we need to bend them, put a curve into them, but kind of bend them downwards while putting a curve into them. So bring it around here, downwards and back out to the same side where it's coming from. And do the same with the other one. Also bring it downwards and then back out to the same side where it's coming from. And now what we need is for these two to have a nice curve in them and an even curve on both sides. So about the same size, but then actually also meet up in the middle. So you can just gradually bring them further and further out. Now how large you want this embellishment piece to be is really up to you, but what I also like to do is use some pliers for this, because like I said, I'm using these 6 bill making pliers, so I know exactly what size I'm going to get. So you can use them, and I'm going to be using the second smallest again to kind of place roughly in there, and also help just bring the wire in place, because like I said, we want to make sure that they meet up next to each other, not overlapping or anything, kind of in the middle of the word, as much in the middle as possible. So I need to bring this one further out, because you can also just sometimes grab onto the wire more easily with pliers than you can with your fingers, because you can get them into spaces where you can't really get your fingers sometimes. So slowly getting there, but we want to make sure we don't have too big of a space and gap underneath the word and then between those loops there as well. So once you have those two first initial loops in place and they're as even as possible, then we just need to shape the rest as well and basically finish off the base wires. So I'm going to grab my round nose pliers, and then I'm just going to use the very tip, because this little loop that we're going to do now is going to be very small, more or less as small as we can make it. Just grab on to just where this end is starting to overlap, and we kind of have those complete loops there in the middle. And then I want to push this end of the wire back around in the opposite direction again, coming around the outside of the pliers to form another little circle. You can see this one becomes quite a bit smaller, just to give it a nice design effect as well, and have it become a full circle there so it overlaps itself. One more time, something a bit like that. Same thing on the other side. Place the pliers right at the tip there, and then bring the tail back around to create that full circle. And again, then overlapping. And then if you need to change position, just do that so we can get the wire all the way around. More or less like that. You can see we have two little circles, and just make sure that the upper part of those little loops that we just made meet up and sit next to the previous wire coming out from that weave right there, so they don't overlap, because we want it to be as flat as possible. So now what we need to do is actually cut off the excess of these wires here. So to cut off the excess wire, I'm going to be using my flush cutters here. And what we're going to do is cut off just one at a time, and we basically need to cut it where the wire starts to overlap with itself, but we're still going to keep that full circle. So that means that once we cut it, the very end of the wire is going to basically end up sitting up against itself, the side of itself. So we just want to cut it in that right place there. And rather cut off too little than too much, because you can always cut off a little bit more. But obviously you can't add any length to it once you have cut it. So you can see just like that. So basically, once I then get my chain nose pliers instead, flatten it down, it makes the end sit, like I just said, up against the side of itself, but still completing that full circle. So cut that off and then obviously repeat the same thing on the other side. Now once you cut off the excess there, what you just want to make sure of as well is that from this little end of the wire where we cut it off and between the wire that it butts up against, you just want to make sure there's enough space for a length 3.4mm to go through. So just kind of make sure that whether that means you have to cut off just a little tiny bit more or whether you kind of just open it up a little bit, because we need to be able to get that through once we get further around, so we can then keep wrapping with the 0.4mm wires here, which we now need to pick back up again and also connect the whole piece more together. And then I just flip my piece here just so it's a bit more comfortable to work with. You can hold it however you need to hold it, that's best for you. But then I'm just going to start on this side. It doesn't matter what side you start on because we're going to do the same with both. But we basically need to get these weaving wires in towards the middle and meet up there. So this weaving wire here is wrapping around in this fashion. Just continue the way that it's wrapping. But right now I only want to wrap around that, you can kind of call it the middle wire by itself. So I need to bring it between those two loops to get it in between those two bottom wires here. And push it down so it's coming up between those two wires. And then just wrap around again. So I'm now just doing a few wraps around that single wire, working my way into the point where the little loop where we finished off the base wire is meeting up with the other base wire here. And now I'm pretty much at that point. So what I want to do now is connect it. So what I'm going to do is, instead of just wrapping around this one that I've been doing by itself, I need to bring my wire, weaving wire, in to that little loop. You can also feed your end through however you feel comfortable, and then still bring it down through those between the two loops in the middle. So that's one. So now basically I'm wrapping that weaving wire around two base wires. Do the same again. Just wrap it, bring it into that little loop and then between the two larger loops in the middle, and now we have it twice. And now what I want to do is go back to wrapping around the same middle wire there by itself, so the exact same one that I did before. I just wanted to catch that little loop there to make sure to also kind of fasten it. So now I'm going to the end of my weaving wire and bringing it down through this large loop on this side. And then what you can do is kind of bring it back out straight away. You can also feed it through and then pull it all the way through and then feed it through the other way. It's completely up to you. But then just pull it through like that, and make sure every time you tighten your wraps that you push it nice and tight as well. Going through here. So basically now we're just working our way in towards the middle where these two larger loops meet. And then once you get there with that, don't quite get to the point where they meet up because we also need to then connect them. But then also go to the other side, use this weaving wire that we have remaining and do the same thing. So just go around that middle one by itself and then just come down through the two middle large loops there, and otherwise connect that little loop with the current wire that we're weaving around as well, just to make that connection point, and then also bring this weaving wire all the way into the middle. So basically we end up with the weaving wires in the same place but coming from either side. So now I got both my weaving wires in towards the middle there. So what we need to do to connect those two large loops is just use one of them. So you can just push the other one out of the way. It doesn't really matter which one. Just going to take this one over here, and it's coming from the left one and it's coming up from below. So what I need to do is go down through the one on the opposite side, so that when I pull this through, just keep the other one out of the way there. Basically this weaving wire is going over the top of both of them. Just make sure they stay flat next to each other. Make sure to still push it up and then come up through the other one again, because we want to do this a couple of times to make sure it's a strong connection point. So bring it up through and make sure that that weaving wire is flat over the top of both of them, and then down through again. Now you can do this 2 to 3 times depending how many you feel you need really. Make sure they're nice and tight, and I might just do it a third time. pull it through, still make sure they're nice and flat next to each other. And you can also do that by using a pair of chain nose pliers, kind of push those wraps that you're doing flat over the top of the base wires. So like that. And then just that third time. To something like that there. And now what I want to do is bring it back to the same side where it originally came from, because we still need to kind of have the two lengths of the weaving wire separated to each their own side. Now the other one obviously is coming from above those double wraps, you could say, above the wraps of across both base wires. So all you do is you just bring that down behind them, and then you can just continue wrapping. So this one here on the bottom that I used to wrap across both, you just want to continue now on the same base wire, so around that same loop, and we need to work our way all the way around to basically cover up this base wire with wraps as well. So you do that, and with the other one, like I said, you just bring it behind those double wraps and then start weaving again, wrapping this single weaving wire around the single base wire, and again working your way all the way around. And the same thing when you get to this double wrap or connection point, you could call it, you just bring the weaving wire behind it and then continue with your wraps afterwards until you fill up the whole base wire, like I said, and then all that's left to do is finish it off. So to then finish off the weaving wires, when you made your way all the way out to that edge there, I'm going to take my flush cutters and cut off the excess, but I've just made sure I've done my last wrap, but instead of bringing it through that little loop, just kind of placed it over in the same direction that the wraps are going. And then I cut off the excess, making sure I leave enough of a little tail, just about 1 millimeter or so that when I then take my chain nose pliers, and kind of see it there, yeah, that little tail sticking out, we just need to push that in. So it's going to end up basically nestling inside that little loop. Almost, it's continuing the wrap still, but obviously we just cut off the excess wire. And that way, the end of the wire is tucked away, so it's not going to catch or scratch on anything, and also not going to come undone. Obviously do the same thing on the other side, and otherwise there's also these weaving wires left to finish right at the beginning where we started weaving. So at that very adjustable ring band part. So you basically just want to do the same thing. You just want to kind of bring your wire around to where you want to finish it off. And I like to kind of do it on the outside. And then I'm going to cut off the excess, leaving a couple of millimeters. Something like that. Then I take my chain nose pliers. I've done my last wrap already. And what I like to do is just grab onto that very end, and then I put a little kink into it, inwards towards the ring band. And then when I push it down, because we have a tiny little space left, the very tip of the base wires, so you wanted to make sure to tuck this in, so that little kink inwards, the end of the wire that we made, actually goes into that little space, so in between the base wires, and it's kind of also just continues the weave anyway, and that way you really get rid of those weaving wires as well, and also not going to catch or scratch on anything. So obviously finish off the rest of them as well, and then once you've done that, if you want to, you can just bring it back on your ring mandrel if it's gone a little bit out of shape, resize it if you need to make it a little bit tighter if it's gone too open, or reshape it as well, but otherwise you're going to have your finished ring. So once you then finished your ring, then it's ready to wear, and it looks a little something like this. So I just made one both copper there and then one in silver, just to show you the different effect that you can get from choosing a different color wire. So obviously it's the same basic design, but then it's nice and comfortable to wear because it's not too bulky in any way, but also obviously because we have that adjustable part on the back. So it just kind of really molds to your finger. It's not going to be too tight or anything. Just kind of put the other one on here, you can see them next to each other. You can see it gives a really nice effect of that love writing, but then we just embellished it a little bit extra with these kind of loops that we made underneath. But obviously that's also then how we finish it off and make it adjustable in the first place. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Now do check out my YouTube channel because I have loads of the tutorials and loads for wirework rings as well. If you like them, I do like making them myself, so please feel free to check that out. Otherwise, I really hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you so much for watching it, and I'll see you in the next one.